Joining us tonight for another in Proud series of Courageous Conversations. So Proud stands for people reaching out for unity and diversity. And the mission of Proud is to sponsor opportunities that will encourage Ferguson residents to work together to build a community of harmony and equity within a diverse group of people. We see the Courageous Conversations as an integral part of our mission. The Courageous Conversations are meant to provide a neutral forum where we can listen to each other with the diverse voices of our community and work to improve understandings between all of us and find ways that we can work together to heal our community and move our community forward together. Tonight's topic is what are consent decrees really about? Our topic is a further investigation of issues that were discussed in a recent PBS Frontline special entitled Policing the Police 2020. That concerned police and community relations in Newark, New Jersey that resulted in a consent decree for that community. It doesn't exactly match what is going on in Ferguson and the reasons for our consent decree, but gave a good background for some of the issues that affected the relationship between the police and the community. Tonight's discussion is also a follow-up to our last Tuesday's quarterly status hearing regarding the Ferguson Consent Decree. And it also follows on the heels of Thursday night's mayoral town hall in which Chief Armstrong and Nicole Barton had presentations to update the community on what had happened at the quarterly status hearing. So tonight, we hope to do something a little bit different and step back to review the general purpose of consent decrees and examine the ways that Ferguson Decree relates to policing in the neighboring communities and throughout the state. So tonight's format is going to be, once I finish the introductions, then we will have a short discussion of the Ferguson Consent Decree. Following that, we will introduce tonight's panelists, and each of our panelists have been asked to provide a short presentation. We'll finish the evening with questions to the panelists. We will compile the questions from the questions you submit through the chat dialogue. There is an icon at either the top or the bottom of your screen that will allow you to access the chat and allow you to type your questions in. We have several hosts who are monitoring the chat and will take your questions and then pose them to each of the presenters. And that way we can preserve your anonymity if you would like to pose a question anonymously. So we are also muting everyone except the presenters, and we've replaced these restrictions on the chat to allow us to record tonight's event while still maintaining confidentiality for everyone. So we have quite a few members of Proud who are assisting with this presentation, and I really want to extend my appreciation to everyone who's helping. I also wish to extend a sincere gratitude to each of our presenters tonight. And then I'm going to now turn over the mic to Proud's other on-screen facilitators for this evening. Dr. Jackie Lewis-Harris is one of Proud's co-vice chairs, and Dr. Cassandra Butler is a past secretary and current executive board member.
Okay, so I'll go. So I just wanted to give a little blurb about introducing the consent decree. So I think I'll start with just saying the United States is a democracy, and as such, it's supposed to, we get together and we make decisions. But of course, we can't each individually make decisions. So actually, we are a representative democracy, and we elect representatives to help us make collective decisions. But at the same time, our founders recognized that they didn't want to have tyranny of the majority or 51% rule, because that could allow people to, by 51%, take advantage of the 49%. So therefore, they decide to have a republic. So we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic. And by making us a republic, that guarantees the rights of individuals. So you see, within the United States, we always have this tension between power structures, the rights of individuals, and the rights of the majority. So the republic is really, the individual rights are enshrined in the Bills of Rights. And so the Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice, is designed to protect the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights that are enshrined in the United States Constitution. So therefore, that gives them the right to police the police, to make sure the police or any other source of power within the United States do not infringe upon individual rights, as well as other constitutional amendments. So the definition of a consent decree is that a consent decree is an agreement or settlement that resolves a dispute between two parties, in this case, Department of Justice and a governmental agency such as police or municipality, without admission of guilt or liability, and most often refers to such a type of settlement in the United States. So that's it in a nutshell. I want to get to our panelists. We have a distinguished list of panelists. I'm really glad that everyone's here. I think I'll introduce each one as they get ready to speak. So, Alan, you did give the order of the agenda tonight. So the first speaker is going to be Carlton Myers. The second, he is owner and consultant of Myers Strategic Solutions. I met Carlton actually outside of Ferguson City Hall right after Michael Brown's death. And when the city councils became popular. At that time, Carlton was representing the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and he provided a perspective of civil rights and policing from a national perspective. That was something that we within the community did not have. So he added critical knowledge for the average Ferguson resident, and I will always be grateful. Carlton has taken his commitment further and now does work with assisting the ordinary people engaged in substantial ways to interacting with police in their communities. We are grateful that Myers is able to give us a background on the initial findings of the GOJ report and what the consent decree is intended to do. With no further ado, I introduce Mr. Myers. We'll get them to you momentarily. Carlton, are you mute? So,
Hello, can you hear me now?
yeah, hi,
Thank you.
Carlton.
Thank you so much. I know we're all getting used to the virtual world here, and I've never been in a meeting where I can't unmute myself. So this is a first for me. But thank you so much,
So
Melinda.
sorry.
No, it's all right. No, we're all getting used to this new world we're living in. But I just want to say good evening to everybody, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. I do want to make sure that I'm clear with everybody that I used to work at NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, which was phenomenal, but I do not work there anymore. It's been at least 3 years. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that. However, as Cassandra just detailed and talked about, through my consulting company, Mayor Strategic Solutions LLC, I work with communities across the country on establishing their own policing reforms centered on community empowerment through an approach that I developed and informed by my years of experience as a community lawyer called the CAT approach, which stands for C, community empowerment, A, accountability, and T, transparency. So that's what I'm doing now with my life, just so that people I've worked with on this call, if you're wondering, what am I doing now? This is what I'm doing. So just moving along with what I'm talking about, in the aftermath of the tragic police killings of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Daniel Prude, and the unjustified shooting of Jacob Blake, there is once again an increased public awareness and attention to police violence against people, especially persons of color, which has caused a decline in the public's confidence in police and galvanized a call for police accountability. However, there will not be true police accountability until the underlying issue of policing is addressed. This issue is the power disparity that exists between community members and police. And police are tasked with protecting and serving community members, and community members, they essentially are paying their taxpayer dollars to fund police salaries and pensions. So in this relational dynamic, police can use lethal force without accountability on a community member who simply makes quote unquote furtive movements. But due to qualified immunity, community members are not even able to sue individual officers for alleged misconduct. To this end, this power disparity must be balanced, and communities must be empowered to change police practices, policies, and culture in order to eradicate police misconduct and establish sustainable and long-standing policing reform. This is important because ultimately, what I call the 4 basic elements of a community being community members, police, elected and appointed government officials, and the news media all have to work together as one community to ensure public safety and police accountability. And this connects directly to the establishment and implementation of the Ferguson Consent Decree, which is what I'm here to talk about with you today. So in August 2014, Mike Brown, who was an unarmed 18-year-old African-American, died as a result of use of excessive and lethal force by former police department officer Darren Wilson. In addition to the investigation Darren Wilson's actions, the U.S. Department of Justice initiated a pattern or practice investigation of the Ferguson Police Department, which was published in March 2015 as a report, and found that the Ferguson Police Department engaged in unlawful, racially biased, and predatory policing. The U.S. Department of Justice's investigation also highlighted the court practices that Ferguson police and employees used to generate revenue for the city of Ferguson and the municipal court. In addition to, based on the U.S. Department of Justice's investigative report, the Ferguson Police Department violated various constitutional rights of African-American residents, particularly in Ward 3, and peaceful protesters. For instance, the report stated that the Ferguson Police Department conducted a pattern of stops without reasonable suspicion and arrests without probable cause in violation of the Fourth Amendment. The report also found that the Ferguson Police Department enabled and encouraged excessive use of force in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Additionally, the report stated that the Ferguson Police Department infringed on free expression as well as retaliated for protected expression in violation of the First Amendment. More specifically, according to the U.S. Department of Justice's report, the city of Ferguson allowed its focus on revenue generation to fundamentally compromise the role of Ferguson's municipal court. The municipal court did not act as a neutral arbiter of the law or as a check on unlawful police misconduct. Rather, the court primarily used its judicial authority as a means to compel payment of fines and fees that advanced the city's financial interests. This resulted in court practices that violated the 14th Amendment's due process and equal protection requirements. The court's practices also imposed unnecessary harm overwhelmingly on African Americans and ran counter to public safety. In fact, the court issued municipal arrest warrants not on the basis of public safety needs, but instead as a routine response to missed court appearances and required fine payments. The city also added charges, fines, and fees for each missed appearance and payment. It is important to note that the court imposed these severe penalties for missed appearances and payments, even as several of the court's practices created unnecessary barriers to resolving a municipal violation. The court often failed to provide clear and accurate information regarding a person's charges or court obligations. And the court's fine assessment procedures did not sufficiently provide for a defendant to seek fine reduction on account of financial incapacity or to seek alternatives to payment, such as community service. Likewise, the U.S. Department of Justice investigative report especially emphasized the adverse disproportionate impact that Ferguson's police and court practices had on African Americans, and the evidence that this is due in part to intentional discrimination on the basis of race. For instance, data collected by the Ferguson Police Department from 2012 to 2014 showed that African Americans accounted for 85% of vehicle stops, 90% of citations, and 93% of arrests made by Ferguson Police Department officers, despite making up only 67% of Ferguson's general population. Also, nearly 90% of documented force used by Ferguson Police Department officers was used against African Americans. And in about every canine bite incident, the person bitten was African American. Furthermore, African Americans were 68% less likely than others to have their cases dismissed by the court, and were more likely to have their cases last longer and result in more required court encounters. African Americans were also at least 50% more likely to have their cases lead to an arrest warrant. And of those actually arrested by the Ferguson Police Department only because of an outstanding municipal warrant, well, 96% of them were African American. All of these findings led to the U.S. Department of Justice's lawsuit against the city of Ferguson for these constitutional violations, which resulted in a lawsuit settlement agreement, as Cassandra just talked about, also known as the Ferguson Consent Decree, which is a court enforceable agreement that includes policy reforms to address the adverse policing and court practices detailed in the U.S. Department of Justice's investigative report. So ultimately, in order to adequately accomplish implementation of the Ferguson Consent Decree, community empowerment-centered policing reform is necessary to balance this ongoing power disparity by empowering communities. And once again, when I say communities, I'm speaking about those four basic elements of the community, being community members, police, elected and appointed government officials, and the news media, all working together as one community to ensure public safety and police accountability, and thus providing long-term solutions to a long-term problem. So thank you again, and I look forward to working with you through the CAT approach.
Okay, thank you so much. Even I learned some more. So thank you so much.
That's what the Q&A is for.
So thank you. So now that we have that set up background, we can move on and talk a little bit about, so what's going on with Ferguson now that we have the consent decree. I am happy to welcome Ms. Nicole Barton as our Ferguson Consent Decree coordinator. She's been here in Ferguson about a year, and she is tasked with making sure that the city is in compliance with the consent decree that we just mentioned, and she keeps tracks of a lot of moving parts. Ms. Barton began her career in law enforcement on the probation and parole side, and her most recent position before she came to Ferguson was as the first executive director of the Civilian Oversight Board for St. Louis City. This was only the second civilian review board in the state of Missouri, so I feel that we are really fortunate to be able to add her to our city staff as the consent decree coordinator. So, Ms. Barton, welcome. As we find you, are you muted? So can we unmute Ms. Barton?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate tonight and have the opportunity to give everyone an update of our consent decree. We just ended year 4 and we're entering into year 5. As you all know, this has been a very challenging year. We've faced many unexpected challenges this year, from pandemic to protests. And even with the pandemic, we still met the majority of all of our year 4 work plan deadline dates and goals with respect to our consent decree. This year, the city partnered with Community Mediation Services to be the neutral facilitators for the series of our small group dialogues between community members and police officers. These dialogues were actually slated to begin in April. However, due to COVID, we had to postpone those. In discussions with the DOJ and monitor team, we decided to schedule a pilot Zoom call with community members and FPD officers, and we were able to kick that first meeting off on September the 15th. Feedback from both the officers and our community participants regarding the dialogues have been great, and we are so excited to move forward with further discussions in the future, and we hope to have those in person eventually. This year, I also worked with the Ferguson Florissant School District in collaborating on ideas of how to gain the students' input on our fair and impartial policing policy. I worked with the DOJ and monitor team to come up with questions for our youth. During the first week that the students went back to school, Ferguson Florissant School District placed our questions on an assignment on the Canvas platform. The deadline date for the feedback was actually just this past Friday, but I am pleased to say that we had over 120 students respond to those questions. That was more than I ever expected to get, and we're so excited about reviewing those responses. So I will be working with the DOJ and the monitor team in the next few weeks on how to incorporate our youth's input into our fair and impartial policing policies. I would like to take just a few minutes to explain the process of developing and implementing policies, because I get lots of questions about why does this take so long all the time. The first step in this process is for FPD and the DOJ to work together. We research and we develop and write draft plans for these policies. Once all the parties have agreed on a draft plan, then it's submitted to the monitor team for review and suggestions. Revisions are made if needed, and the next step is to place those policies online for community input. The most recent suite of those policies was our First Amendment policies, and they were online for a period of 60 days. Once the community has given their input and we receive feedback, we work with the DOJ and work together to incorporate community input into those policies. The monitor team has to take a final look to review those policies, and then once all of the parties are in agreement, those policies are finalized. All of our current consent decree policies are online. They're currently on the Ferguson Police Department's website for review. Once that process is complete, we work them into roll call trainings. During year 4, we have accomplished a lot of goals, both in the municipal court and within the Ferguson Police Department. We've done a lot of work on the comprehensive amnesty program, and thousands of cases with fines and fees have been dismissed since the implementation of the consent decree. During the year 4 work plan, we were to develop a community engagement plan and a crime prevention plan. And since February of 2020, I have been working closely with the NPSC and which is our Neighborhood Police Steering Committee, in case anyone didn't know, and our Civilian Review Board, community engagement subcommittees to develop this community engagement plan. And this plan incorporates our community engagement efforts, problem-solving policing, and police community partnerships. That draft plan was submitted to the DOJ and the monitor team on July the 31st. And thank you to all of our community participants that volunteer their time and work with us to develop these plans. I really appreciate it. Lots of you are on the call tonight. Thank you so much. Our draft crime prevention plan was also submitted on July the 31st. Recently, FPD requested assistance to enhance our community engagement efforts, and Chief Armstrong and I have collaborated with CRITEC, which is the Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center. And they will be providing resources for Ferguson Police Department to guide and build upon the current community engagement program. Prior to delivery, the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, otherwise known as COPS, will review and approve all the resource material. We had our kickoff call with CRITEC back on September the 10th, and we look forward to working with them to help us develop and advance a culture of cohesion and trust between the police and communities they serve. The city has worked on developing a policy for responding to our Neighborhood Police Steering Committee's recommendations, and the draft plan was submitted to the DOJ and monitor team on April the 30th. I'm currently working with our NPSC on incorporating the general group's final comments, suggestions, and feedback so that we can finalize this plan during year 5. We have established neighborhood associations in each of our apartment complexes. FPD was regularly attending the neighborhood meetings, and we were working to establish some problem-solving policing and crime prevention goals with our residents. Due to COVID, we have not been able to meet in person with them for the last several months. However, we do have regular Zoom meetings with our apartment complex managers and owners to assist the neighborhood's needs and goals. And I want to thank our apartment complex managers and owners who help make this possible and really help work with our residents who live in these neighborhoods. During year 4, the city is to develop and implement a staffing plan, and this plan was submitted to the Department of Justice on July 31st. During this year, I worked closely with Community Mediation Services to finalize a neighborhood mediation plan that would promote resolutions to disputes among community members and reduce the need for involvement with the criminal justice system. In addition, this plan also provides a community-centered mediation program as an alternative to certain misconduct investigations for certain civilian complaints. And I am pleased to inform everyone that we did have our first successful police citizen mediation in July of this year. Also on July 31st, a draft plan for reassessment and revision of the municipal code was submitted to the Department of Justice and the monitor team for review. This plan will be presented to our city council during year 5 for approval and budget allocations. Per paragraph 67 of the consent decree, FPD and courts developed policies to address timely and meaningful access for services for limited English proficiency individuals, and those policies were submitted on July the 31st as well. During this phase, we also worked closely with the Department of Justice and monitor team to finalize our investigatory detention policy and revise the field interview reports. We have worked closely with the Department of Justice and the monitor team to finalize the suite of policies for our search and seizures. The following policies have been approved: stops and detentions, warrantless searches, Mirandas, and search warrants, and we are currently waiting on approval for our citations and arrests. During this year, we also worked closely with the Department of Justice on our First Amendment policies. And again, as I stated earlier, they were placed on our website for public comments, and we are working together right now to incorporate those public comments into our First Amendment policies. We hope to have those policies finalized soon and begin conducting trainings on those policies. In March of 2020, the city entered into a contract with Benchmark Analytics, and they provide a software system for FPD. As a means for computer tracking, because we were doing all this tracking by hand, paper files, but now we're up to code and being able to track those with a software system. We're currently working with Benchmark to develop our use of force forms, our use of force review, and our vehicle pursuits. We are in the final stages of getting those approved now. We also just recently finalized our body worn and in-car camera policies, as well as our footage sharing policies. On July 31st, we submitted our salary study, which was the last component to finalize our recruitment plan. Regarding data collections, the city initiated an agreement with Datalytics, and they came and did an on-site visit with us and provided a gap analysis for us so that we could figure out what data we were missing and what data we needed to collect for our consent decree. Since that time, FPD has added specific signals to our crime analysis data system that would allow FPD to track our community policing and engagement efforts. Datalytics helped develop our crime dashboards that report our crime statistics in our community, and those dashboards are finalized and they're live on our website for review. In regards to training this year, we worked really hard to finalize our policies, develop roll call trainings, and we have completed roll call trainings for critical incidents, investigatory stops and detentions, field interview reporting, professional standards and disciplinary guidelines, warrantless searches and seizures, and consent to search. Recently, we also submitted our crisis intervention training manual, PowerPoint, and lesson plans for the Department of Justice's approval. We also submitted our police training officer program for their approval recently. On April 30th, we submitted our draft supervisor training plan. And during year 4, FPD conducted roll call trainings on all of its use of force policies. During this year, we will be working with the Department of Justice to see how we can incorporate those in-service trainings into this area as well. During year 4, both Assistant Chief Nicolle and I worked closely with the MPSC Training Plan Committee to develop a draft training plan. We worked to identify gaps between what St. Louis County Police Academy offers and what the Ferguson Police Department will need to develop for in-service trainings. We submitted that draft plan to the monitor team and the DOJ on April the 30th, 2020. So thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to give you this update. We're excited to go into our year 5. I'm working closely right now with the monitor team to develop all of our goals and deadlines for year 5, and hopefully we'll have that draft out to everyone within the next 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barton, Nicole. So many balls in the air, and so we're grateful that you're here as our coordinator. So much. So, and also with the Ferguson City, we have Chief of Police, Jason Armstrong. Jason has also been with the city for a little over a year now. And he comes to us from Forest Park, Georgia, having completed 18 years at Forest Park, Georgia. So he was recently appointed to the International Association of Chiefs of Police Community Policing Committee, and he has a particular interest in community policing. He brings to us, or comes to us, with a master's degree in public safety administration, and he is committed with working with the community to build strong partnerships and to serve the community needs. So with no further ado, Chief Armstrong.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone that's joining us and that's on the Zoom meeting that we're in. So as Ms. Barton just outlined, first off, can you all hear me? I'm not muted or anything.
Yes.
Okay, all right. As Ms. Barton just outlined, we have made a lot of progress, and we have accomplished a lot of things over this last year, working on the consent decree. And one of the things that I get asked often is how does working on the consent decree impact the police department, impact the police officers more specifically. And the big thing that I wanted to kind of highlight with the consent decree and the work that goes into it is just the amount of time and amount of resources that it consumes for us to make the progress that we've made. So to kind of put it in a little bit of context, the city of Baltimore is under a consent decree. And Baltimore's consent decree is 511 paragraphs. Ferguson's consent decree is 464 paragraphs of guidelines and stipulations that we have to meet. Baltimore has a team of 20 people that are designated to work on their consent decree. So all 20 of those individuals, that is what their primary function and responsibility is, to work on their consent decree, all 511 paragraphs of it. Here in Ferguson, we have one person, and that's who you just heard from, which is Ms. Barton. And so all of the things that she's working on and everything that she's tasked with, you know, it's a collaboration between her and members of the police department, where we're a small department. Right now, we have 35 sworn officers. That is it. The city of Chicago's consent decree team is bigger than our entire police department. And so we don't have a lot of resources to pull from. And so the fact of what she just highlighted in her report of our accomplishments just speak to the dedication and the effort that's being put forth by not only her, but the men and women of this agency and this department to try to make these things happen and for us to meet the standards that have been put before us with the consent decree. And so, you know, our biggest challenge with things are people. You know, we're severely understaffed right now with our officers, and that's one of the things that we're working hard on and trying to recruit to build up our staffing levels. But that doesn't slow down, you know, the requirements or the deadline dates or anything that's put on us, you know, by the consent decree. And so we still, you know, we're steady piling things on to everybody's plate here, you know, with the small amount of people that we have to share in the workload. But we're still meeting deadlines, we're still getting things done, and we're still working toward, you know, the goals that we have before us. it's just, you know, that's a part of the struggle and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to facilitate. One of the things that I want to highlight to kind of, you know, just kind of, like I said, add some context for when we talk about these things. And so Ms. Barton mentioned that we were able to bring on a software system and Benchmark, which, you know, that system will help us tremendously in being able to track information and being able to file information. Right now, everything is done by hand, or, you know, historically, everything has been done by hand here, where we get a computer system where we can input that stuff into the computer system, what gives us just ease of access of information. And we've been working on the use of force forms. And so since we got this Benchmark system, the system is completely customizable. And so, you know, we worked on creating a customized form to capture all of the information and data that is mandated, that's in the consent decree. And so it takes us in-house internally, you know, it takes us about a month or so to go through everything and to work that up, to create a good working document that we believe is covering all of the information and everything that the consent decree says that we have to have in it. So once we get to that point where we feel as though we have a good working document, then we have to bring in the Department of Justice, then we have to bring in the monitoring team. We started on this process back in July, I believe it was, just with one form. Just with one form. Here we are, we're at the end of September, we're going into October, and we're still working on that one form. And so, you know, it's important for the community members to understand just the level of detail and work that goes into just creating one form. And that's how much work goes into it. And part of it is because we have people, we only have one full-time person, which is Ms. Barton. And so the other people that have to work on that is myself, is the assistant chief. It's, you know, Captain Dealworth, you know, and all of us are carrying additional other responsibilities and things that we are in charge of, but that we have to dedicate time and energy and resources to. And so, you know, when we talk about how long this consent decree is taking, or the progress that, you know, the city has made on it, you know, those are some of the contributing factors that play an integral role into what that looks like and how it's done, is because we're working with limited resources, and we don't have an expansive team that, you know, just works on this 24/7, or, you know, all of their workday is dedicated to it. You know, we have to significantly, you know, spread it around. And one of the things that we're experiencing right now is an increase in crime. And so for those who were on the mayor's town hall meeting, or have gone to the website and looked at the presentations and things that were presented, you know, we see right now here in Ferguson, overall, we have about a little over 13% increase in overall crime for the city right now. Particularly when it comes to violent crimes. You know, we've seen a significant uptick in violent crimes. And so when we have those violent crimes, it takes a lot more resources for us in responding to those calls and handling those calls and investigating, you know, those calls. And so although we have, you know, a tall task on our hands of working with the consent decree and trying to get everything in play and lined up for us to meet those obligations, you know, the day-to-day things that come up just in policing and calls for service, and, you know, nothing stops for us. And so, you know, we're adding on, you know, just more and more layers and more tasks and more things that we have to do, but nothing is coming off of our plate, you know, in the interim. And that's, you know, specifically where the manpower issue really comes into play, and not having, you know, more people that we can spread that out and help with that workload. And so, you know, those are some of the challenges, you know, that we face with that. One of the things that I want to highlight, and hopefully it'll be a part of our conversation, and for those that were on the small group dialogue kickoff session that we had, Alan brought up a good point during that dialogue session, where we had some individuals from one of the managers from our apartment complex that was speaking about, you know, what her challenges were and what the challenges were down in the apartment complex and the things that they were dealing with and what their concerns were. And then Alan spoke up afterwards, and he talked about, well, where he lives and in his part of the city, he did not have those same issues and problems. Therefore, he did not share he didn't have those same concerns and issues related to where he was staying and where he was living. And that is pretty consistent from what I see and the feedback that I get from talking to just, everybody in the community that I have the opportunity to speak with and meet out in the community. And one of the questions that was on the agenda was, what's the outlook and the overall impact on the city and the quality of life, for all Ferguson residents? And that's different. That doesn't look the same throughout our entire community. And so some of the conversations that I've had with people is talking to some members in our community and ask, okay, what is your view on police department and how police officers interact with community members, today compared to, before 2014 happened. And so some of the feedback that I get is it's positive. And speaking to, some of our younger Black males in the community, some of the responses that I've gotten is, well, they don't harass us like they used to. They don't, man, I can walk to the store and they're not always stopping me, talking to me, or I'm not feeling, harassed. And so, that's a positive takeaway from the change that we've seen here in the community. But later on that day, I can be in another part of the city and I can ask a resident, that same question. And what I'm getting is, well, I see crime has increased in this city, since we got the consent decree, and since the DOJ came in here, since the city has been dealing with the spotlight. And, I see things happen in my community that I don't like, that, I didn't see here before. And so they have a totally different outlook on, what's going on in the city now, or what's happening in the city. And so that's why I think, venues like this and arenas like this, where we can bring more people together and community members together to sit and talk it, to sit through and talk these things out, and just talk about the differences and what people's experience are, and how as a community we can work together and take into account what the differences that everybody is bringing, to the table, of how, we can create, a more thriving and a better community where everybody, feels as though that they have a strong voice, and that, we're listening to their concerns, and they're a part of trying to figure out what some of these solutions are to the problems that we have. That's I think largely what the consent decree is trying to get to, is just really, really bringing that community involvement component to the policing and to community policing, to see how we can work together to build a community that everybody wants to be a part of. And so I'm looking forward to the dialogue that we're going to have tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chief Armstrong. Obviously, that is definitely a part of talking about the consent decree, bringing up the challenges we face, because we can't resolve them if we don't know what the challenges are as a community. So I have not seen Brian Williams yet. So hold on a second while we make sure that he's not here. And we had someone calling him to see when he expected to arrive. Okay, so I don't see him. So let's see. So we'll move on without him. But let me just say, one reason we wanted to talk to Brian, and we were happy for him to be part of our group, our panelists, is that we all understand that the consent decree that we have in Ferguson is something that, and the problems that the DOJ discovered when they did their investigation of Ferguson, is not something unique to Ferguson alone. So we know the problems that we had in Ferguson, with how policing is done in Ferguson, is also done all over the St. Louis area. And as we can see, there's some nationwide problems, so we're not unique. So Senator Brian Williams has introduced, or tried to introduce, or he has introduced, and he tried to get passed some police reform at the state level, which would encompass all of the St. Louis area and the whole state. So we wanted to move from just what the problem is in Ferguson to a broader generalization of improving the whole area. So hopefully if we reach him, if he comes on, we'll still let him talk. But at this point, we're just gonna go ahead and compile the questions that we have and start asking questions, if that's okay with everybody.
So to remind everyone, this is meant to be your conversation. So we encourage you to put questions into the chat. Our both Cassandra and Jackie are monitoring the chat and compiling the questions so that we can ask of the panelists. And yes, we have reached out to Senator Williams and have not had any success yet. So I have, so first, thank you to the presenters. We really, really appreciate you being here and the good information that you provided for us. To start off the questions, I'll ask the first one because it came through our email, and it's a very common question that's being asked all the time, but I think with the other panelists may have differing ideas on how to respond to this. So the Ferguson Police Department had 53 officers in 2014. Since then, we've never had more than 40 for any length of time. And with the uneven application of Prop P and the recent legislation that was passed by the Missouri legislature that affects the St. Louis city residency requirements, it appears that recruiting and maintaining staff is only going to get harder. So we wanted to know what was the prognosis for FPD staffing, and are there any innovative solutions or collaborations that could help reduce the burdens on our current officers? So typically, Chief Armstrong is having to field this question on basically a bi-monthly basis, but I don't know if you have new things to add to this, and then we can ask some of our other panelists if they have something to share.
You're on mute. You're on, okay. So let's see if someone, Lindsay, can you unmute him?
All right, what about now?
Okay, you're good.
Okay. Yes, Alan, that's one of our biggest challenges. And so, you know, I can speak to what my experience has been since I've been here. And the biggest struggle for us is recruiting experienced officers. And just to be quite frank, you know, an experienced officer, a quality experienced officer, you know, typically can go to another city, make more money, and have to deal with a lower workload, or, you know, a lower call volume, not getting worked as hard as you're getting worked here, and don't have to deal with all of the challenges that we have to deal with, you know, here in Ferguson. And so, you know, this is, we get a lot of people apply to work here. to be officers here. What I found is, people who have experience, a lot of them do not make it out of our background investigation because, there's something in their background that we cannot accept here. And so, that's one of the challenges, that we find with that as far as recruiting experienced officers. And so we have a lot of people, because we have an academy program here where, we can hire individuals and send them through the academy. We get a lot of people that apply, for that. And so we're looking at some individuals right now sending through the academy. The downside to that is the academy is 6 months long. And so we hired that individual and send them to the academy. That's 6-7 months before they would be coming to us, to work. And so, so it's trying to strike, a good balance between, how do we do a good enough job of trying to make ourselves appealing for quality veteran officers, that we feel as though can come on board and contribute to what we're trying to do here. Also with, bringing on younger officers, that we can send to the academy and bring on also. And so the bulk of the newest officers that we've hired here, the bulk of them came out of the academy, whether we hired them and sent them to the academy, or it was individuals who had who were putting themselves through the academy, and we did recruiting at the academy classes, and we hired some on. And so, with St. Louis City making that change in their rules, they're absolutely going to be a lot more competitive in recruiting individuals, and so it's just something that we have to stay committed to trying to bring quality officers on. But it is a challenge here for us, absolutely.
Can I ask you, if it sounds like a question of demand and supply, particularly for quality. So is there anything about the consent decree that you think hinders your ability to have more police officers?
Yes and no. And so here's the yes part of it. If in policing, so if I was a veteran officer, say if I had 10 years of police experience, okay, I'm used to policing a certain kind of way. And we can argue all day long how good or how bad or what that looks like. But just to put it into context, okay. Most police departments, I'm not going to say they operate the same way, but policing is very similar in police departments in the same general area. But that does not hold true for us here in Ferguson. Like we are a unicorn because of the consent decree. And like was pointed out, the issues and the problems that were noted in the DOJ report are not largely, they weren't specific to Ferguson, as far as Ferguson is the only place that had any of those issues or any of those problems. It is St. Louis wide, or you can just even say, metropolitan area throughout the country. If you did that same type of deep dive, into another city in another state, you would find, similar things more than likely. And so, so what that comes in is what we're doing here. It almost gets into the mindset of, is it harder for somebody to change and to learn things all over again, or learn a new way of doing things? Or do you bring in younger people who don't have the experience, and so they're only learning it for the first time, and they're only learning one way of doing things? And so where I think the consent decree is a hindrance to us are those veteran officers that look at it and know the spotlight that we're under and all the stipulations and guidelines of what we're doing here. And that may not look appealing to them to have to go through all of that at this stage in their career. So that's where it could be a hindrance. The other side of it is, we have to do a very detailed background investigation on officers, and that is absolutely what's needed, and I'm absolutely in favor, of that. But some police departments, are not restricted by that. And so where, if somebody has worked at another police agency and they're applying to be an officer here, all right, one of the things that is mandatory for us to do is to try to look at their post records for the state, if they're in Missouri, the state of Missouri, but also we want to go and look at their personnel files at the other police departments, that they have worked at. Every police department doesn't do that.
Okay.
And so where, we have to do those things and it's absolutely needed and the right thing, to do. Some agencies are able to hire people quicker because they don't have to go through all of the steps that we have to go through, largely associated with the consent decree.
Hey, thank you, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask Jackie, are you
And
getting
Carlton is trying to get in to say something on that.
Okay. Carlton.
I just want to support what the chief just said. I want to remind people that Darren Wilson was a gypsy officer. He was a gypsy cop, which is what Police Chief Armstrong just detailed. Gypsy cops are essentially officers who work at one police department, they engage in misconduct, and then when they get investigated for engaging in misconduct or are found to have engaged in the misconduct, so they're going to be disciplined, they'll jump ship from that police department and then go to another police department, either in the same state or in another state adjacent to the state that the police department they're coming from is located. So Darren Wilson came from another police department where he had engaged in misconduct that was being investigated and reported before he ended up at Ferguson Police Department. So kudos to Police Chief Armstrong, because that was not done before the Mike Brown incident, right? Which is what led to Darren Wilson being in that role where he could use excessive force on an African American. So I just want to say that's a great thing. I also want to add that, I know that there's a lot of issues around, we need more police. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, it comes back down to those four elements of the community, right? Community members, police, both elected and appointed government officials. I know y'all have an appointed city manager, and the news media, all working together for public safety and police accountability. So I'm just saying, even if you don't have as many police, there are other proactive strategies that a lot of communities have been implementing successfully, all right? So it's doable even for a community of the size of Ferguson. Other communities have done it, and I think you can do it too. Now, that's something I'd love to work on with you, but I'm just saying, this is not a novel idea to have a smaller police department that works more effectively with their community members and the other elements of the community, similar to the POP or the problem-solving policing that Nicole brought up earlier, that it seems like y'all have already started integrating into your policing. So I would just say, it's not always a bad thing to have fewer police, as long as the police, I'm saying, are starting to lean more on those other basic elements of the community to provide them the support they need to do proactive strategizing around public safety. So I just wanted to add that, but kudos around the reporting of gypsy cops. Cassandra, you're muted.
I've seen that challenge the whole 4 years, getting the right people, and I respect the slowness. I think that's the right move, but nobody asked my opinion. So I'm not trying to give my opinion. I do want to correct Alan. Alan asked the question in a way that said that we started with 53 and then we've never been much over 40 since then. We did get up. I know Jeff, our city manager, interim city manager, said that we had only gotten up to 40, but actually we had gotten back up to 47 at some point. So I just wanted to correct that. Okay, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Jackie Lewis, Dr. Jackie Lewis, do you have a question? If not,
we had a question from Lynn Ferguson, but I don't see it in chat. But we do have another question about restorative justice, okay, and whether or not restorative justice was part of a decree for Ferguson.
And who should answer? Who do you think?
I can tell you right off the bat that it is, specifically as it relates to school resource officers. So I believe it's somewhere in the 200, paragraph 221 or paragraph 222, there's a reference to restorative justice. It's on page 51 of the consent decree. And so, yeah, it really has to do with how do we prevent juveniles from getting caught up in the system and from having a record, so that as they get older, that record is not used against them for all kinds of opportunities, right? Not only employment or housing, but even public benefits. And so by having restorative justice programs in place that can act as a diversionary program, essentially, that can prevent juveniles from being processed into the system, and ultimately they can be exposed to restorative justice, like a community panel, or there are other techniques of doing that will essentially provide them other ways of learning accountability without them having to be incarcerated. And I'll be honest, I can speak to that personally. When I lived in Vermont, I went to law school there, just in case y'all are wondering, why were you in Vermont? I went to law school there. After I went to law school, I moved to Burlington, Vermont, which is the big city in Vermont. And I was on the restorative justice panel for juvenile offenders for the city of Burlington. I was the only person of color on that panel. And I'll tell you right now, that really opened my eyes to what kids are dealing with at home and why they make certain decisions or are put in certain circumstances when they have parents who are working 3 jobs and just don't have the time to supervise their kids because they got to pay bills. You know, so it's just a reality of people's situation, and restorative justice provides an area, a way that juveniles can not have to go through the system to learn accountability, so that they still have opportunity to do well and achieve even after they've learned those lessons.
Mm.
So in
to
turn,
piggyback, well, and let me just add a little bit to that.
Yes,
Because what we have here with our consent decree, and Ms. Barton alluded to it a little bit earlier when she talked about this past year, our partnership with mediation services. And so one of the things that's added in to what we're doing now, and it's not just for juveniles, but for adults also, is, you know, like neighborhood disputes. And so if you have 2 neighbors that get into a type of altercation or something, one of the things that is built into our program now is where, you know, they could be eligible if both parties are willing to go to mediation. You know, that incident could be handled through mediation as opposed to the police being involved and it being sent through our court system. And so that's another thing, you know, that's in the same, you know, restorative justice lens of trying to give the community alternatives to settle some issues and disputes, as opposed to everything having to be sorted out in the criminal justice system.
thank you. Sandra, you have the next question?
Okay, I do have quite a few questions. So let me see. So there's a question about the interactive dashboard already has a wealth of information on it. One of the things it has is a schedule of roll call training for new policies. A great way to expand community engagement would be to open these sessions to the public. This would increase transparency about the content of the policies and how our officers are trained. It is especially important that members of the Civilian Review Board are welcome to attend so they can fulfill their oversight mandate to review and assess Ferguson Police Department policies, procedures, training, plans, and curricula. So this question is for you, Chief Armstrong, as well as other panelists, on opening roll call training to the public, and especially this Civilian Review Board. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a big fan of bringing in the public into roll call training. Let me explain what roll call trainings are. And so, like Nicole, Ms. Barton laid out what the process is for the creation of our new policies. And so the public has a role in creating our new policies. And so when we create a new policy pertaining to the consent decree, it's put online for public input. And so any member of the public, the officers, the CRB members, everybody is, has input into what's in that policy and is able to provide input and feedback on what goes into that policy. And so once we get that information back, the monitor and us and the DOJ, we all get together and talk about the public input and the public feedback to see, what needs to go in or what changes we need to make to the policy. So once the policy is finalized, then it goes to the officers. So we have a computer system that the policies are loaded up in. And so officers have to review the policies, and they have to, most of these policies have a test that we attach to it. And so they have to take the test and pass the test before they get credit for, okay, this officer has reviewed this policy and they, have a clear understanding of this policy. So once all of that has happened, then that's when we do the roll call training. And so the roll call training is just a refresher of, the last opportunity, so to speak, before everything goes into effect, of just covering some of the key points, the key elements in the policy, to see if there are any last minute questions or issues or concerns, and just checking that the officers, really do have a clear understanding of how the policy is and what the policy is. And so one of the things that I would not want to have happen is everybody's not comfortable in a group. Everybody's not comfortable in a group of people that they don't know or strangers or what have you. And so when the question was brought up to me previously about, having citizens come in as we're giving the officers their roll call training, well, the last thing that I would want to have happen is an officer not feeling comfortable raising their hand and voicing a question or bringing something up that we absolutely need to hear and something that we need to address because, there are citizens there and the officer is fearful, well, if I ask this, the citizen may think this about me or may think that about me, especially when you get to talking about the CRB members, because these are the individuals in the public that review complaints against the officers and what have you. And so I didn't want to muddy the waters with that, where an officer wouldn't feel comfortable voicing something, a concern or an issue with a policy, and then, just having to fear, well, what if I get complained on and then it comes before the CRB members and they didn't like, what I said or asked in this class. And so one of the things that as we're able to get more resources in here, that we're going to create is a Citizens Police Academy. We want to create a Citizens Police Academy. And one of the components of that Citizens Police Academy will be, just going through, and covering the topics and the different things that are outlined in the consent decree or our roll call trainings and things as such, where we can bring the citizens in and we can go over things and go over, some of the same information and PowerPoints and such. But I don't like the idea of bringing all the groups together because I think it will get too convoluted in there.
That makes sense. Let me piggyback one other related question, which is, which policies have been finalized for training, and is there any policies that are actually in effect now and the police force is accountable to at this point?
Man, I'll let Ms. Barton speak to that because she keeps more track of that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barton.
And they should be on the website, though. That's what I was going to say. I think it's all updated on the website, but she needs to be unmuted.
Okay, is that something I could do? Lindsay, can we unmute?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I gave, I know I was talking fast. I had my 10 minutes to present all of that, but in my overview, I did state all of the consent decree policies that have been finalized during year 4, during this year. But since we've updated our website on the Ferguson Police Department website, if you click on the link to roll call trainings, you can see all of the roll call trainings have been completed to date. Ones that start from October through December, you might see pending approval because we're still waiting to get approval on either the policy, the finalizing of the policies with the Department of Justice and the monitor team, or we're waiting on getting approval from the Department of Justice on the roll call material. So we work closely with the DOJ to getting approval on the roll call material before it even gets submitted into the software system that Chief Armstrong was just talking about, and before our roll call trainings are rolled out. So, but all of those are on our website, and we are working on revising our website. And so what I want to do once we get that new website up and running is have a consent decree highlight page that will tell all of the highlights, you know, just basically what I've ran down tonight that we've accomplished during year 4 and the goals of year 5. And so I would keep that updated just like I do with that roll call training link too. So, but all the consent decree policies that have been finalized are on our website where it says consent decree policies, and all of the roll call trainings are under the link that says roll call trainings.
And specifically, are the police officers accountable for those policies at this point in time?
So once roll call training has been completed, they are held accountable for those policies at that time. So again, it kind of goes through that process. We develop, DOJ approves, monitor approves, citizens are able to comment, we incorporate all of that. Then it goes to that final phase of approval for the policies. Then once roll call trainings are implemented, chief signs off on that policy. From that date, officers are held accountable to those standards of that policy.
Thank you.
Could I interject now? So first thing, Lynn Ferguson has had her hand up for quite some time. I don't know if we have a way of responding to you. If you would please put your comment into the chat so that we can respond.
Yeah,
Yes, I just sent her that message.
Okay.
Cassandra, I think I just seen Senator Williams join. So I know you were looking for him earlier, and he's muted, so he probably can't say he's on the call, but okay. I know he had something you wanted him to talk about this evening too.
That's what I was trying to announce. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Alan, I didn't mean to.
Okay, so let's do it this way because it's 7:18 and we did want to close at 7:30. So that sounds like let's get him on, and if we don't get to all the questions, we'll save the questions and we'll still try to get answers to everyone.
And we also hope to have a follow-up to this because there will be a lot of questions left over. And we do not see this as a one-time thing. It's a very complex topic and it needs to be investigated further. So yes, because of time restraints, Senator Williams looks like he is ready. So would you like to give the introduction?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I already gave his introduction. He wasn't here.
That's right.
No, I didn't actually give your introduction now I think about it. But Senator Brian Williams, welcome. And Senator Williams is serving his first year as our Missouri State Senator. He knows our city well, having served for as a congressional staffer to former U.S. Senator Bill Clay, or current Senator Bill Clay. And as such, he was tasked with overseeing rollout of the Affordable Health Care Program in Missouri as a congressional ACA coordinator. So his schooling is in government public health policy, and as such, he is on the board of People's Health Center, which also serves the Ferguson Community Center. So as a senator, Brian Williams knows that what the DOJ found in Ferguson is not unique to Ferguson, and consequently, he had introduced some legislation to help all of Ferguson catch up with some of the reforms that are being done in Ferguson. Senator Williams, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to thank Proud for hosting this platform for us to have a conversation about not only police reform, but how Ferguson has been impacted by the consent decree and how we move forward, not only as a community, but as a region and ultimately as a state. My grandfather, who turned 91 today, with thanks to him, I was able to get on today because I had a very difficult time getting through on the link. So anyone that says that age matters when it comes to technology, that is false, because without him, I would not have been on with you guys this evening. Just really quick, I'd like to just tell you a little additional things about myself. I represent a good portion of North County, including Ferguson in the Missouri Senate. But I don't just represent Ferguson. I grew up in Ferguson. I am from Ferguson. And I remember very clearly walking down West Florissant when it was around, eating breakfast on Saturday mornings at Jason's. And I remember just playing in Ferguson and hanging out at the Street Side Records when that was around. So I'm kind of showing my age a little bit. But you know, this isn't just a conversation about my constituents. This is a conversation about my home. And I'm very proud to be from Ferguson. The death of Michael Brown Jr. put Ferguson in the national spotlight. And today, that national spotlight has moved on, but our work still continues. The Ferguson Consent Decree confirmed what our community had known for years. The system didn't always work for us. The courts were being used to create debtors' prisons. The police were tasked with keeping them filled. Tickets, fines, fees was the name of the game in Ferguson and several municipalities throughout North St. Louis County. The police also understood that, you know, it was a very tough job for them as well. And our citizens were losing every round. There was no trust, period. And without trust, the community can never be truly safe. One example I often give is that of an eyewitness. If a person witnesses a crime, but they know that they contacted law enforcement, that they'll get locked up for a traffic-related bench warrant, they won't come forward. And that's a conversation I had with our governor. We went through a special session. If we put forth a witness protection program, before we even talk about the fact that we haven't discussed how we fund it, but if the community doesn't feel comfortable coming forward to law enforcement, how do we find those bad actors that are creating crimes and trouble within our community? So now the real crime is harder to solve because the court system has made everyone afraid to work with the police. And that's bad for citizens and that's bad for law enforcement. And we can and we clearly must do better. That's what the consent decree made clear. To make our streets safer, we must improve the relationships between police and officers and the communities that they serve. The men and women of law enforcement who risk their lives each and every day deserve to know that elected officials are doing everything that we can to protect the integrity of their honored profession. Through common sense reforms, we can improve community relations and restore the trust that the very foundation of public safety. And I made it very clear to members of law enforcement, and I'm also making it clear to Chief Armstrong, as well as the Ferguson Police Department, that this is not an us versus them situation, and that we're all in this together. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, and countless other Black men and women should still be alive today. But we can't bring them back, and we can't prevent further deaths by passing reasonable police reforms that protect Missourians and officers who serve them. So the question that I've asked in the Missouri Senate, and that's the question I'll ask today: if not now, when? If not us, who? We can do this. And I truly believe this is something that we must do. And with the continued support of local leaders like Mayor Jones, our Ferguson Police Chief, Armstrong, as well as community members like yourself, we can get this done, and we will do it. And I'm counting on all of you to not only support me moving forward around this agenda, but I also know that I'm counting on all of you to come together with ideas so we can make our communities and our state safer. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you so much for your patience. And I'm looking forward to covering whatever questions we can before we have to conclude tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you too, Senator. So, Dr. Lewis Harris, where do you want to go from here?
We have two questions that are conflated into one. And basically, the question was, what can the community members do to help move the decree along? And also, the other question was, how can they reach out to help with technology if needed? So that's reaching out to help with technology and reaching out to assist with taking care of the consent decree goals.
Absolutely. One, I want to be clear. The Senate district that I represent, Ferguson is one of 35 municipalities that I represent. So I represent some of the wealthiest communities in the state, like Clayton and Ladue, but also communities like Ferguson, Kinloch, Berkeley, Hazelwood, Riverview Gardens. So it's so many communities that share a lot of different challenges, and we have to understand that this is an issue that impacts Ferguson, but it's a regional problem, and we have to figure out how do we create an opportunity for us to all come together and really tackle this situation from a macro perspective. So I think talking not only to your neighbors, but communities, folks throughout the region on what these challenges are. We'll be rolling out a comprehensive policing reform bill, which will talk about things like banning chokeholds, addressing no-knock arrest warrants, also ensuring that police officers aren't sexually assaulting folks that they arrest or that are incarcerated, working on a uniform police code to where folks like security guard officers that are working at the Metrolink and in various businesses have proper training, and if they don't, defer to law enforcement to ensure that they're engaging with folks in their community properly. I have to sit down with Chief Armstrong and talk about this as well as Mayor Jones once we roll this out. And what we're hoping to do is tackle this subculture within police departments that have tainted the profession. And this is something that exists in every profession, including mine. So it's not a thing of really saying that we need to come after police departments. This is about providing police departments with the resources as well as the cover to be able to address those bad actors and ensure that they're not they're not in our communities as police officers. Another thing is ensuring that folks aren't bouncing around from municipality to municipality. So that's another big issue that we have. I have communities like Jennings and other entities that have police departments. And if someone leaves Ferguson Police Department because they're doing the right thing and they fire this person, they shouldn't be able to go to another police department and work. We need to have a system in place that the public can go and say, hey, this person has been fired for this, and therefore they should not be policing this community in any fashion. Another thing in terms of technology is talking about this on Facebook and various platforms. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so clearly virtual communication has become the keystone to what we do. And there's been less face-to-face interaction. So clearly once we roll this out, I would love for all of you to share on Facebook and Twitter and various platforms that you use, email, sharing with the community what this comprehensive plan is, and they understand and know what the scope is. And last but not least, this has been something where we've sat down with law enforcement, we've sat down with various folks, activists throughout the region, and we've asked questions on what would you like to see, and ultimately to make our community safe and build a relationship between police and the community. And we've gathered that information, and that's played a significant role in how we approach this. Keep in mind, I serve in a body that is majority Republican. There's 34 senators in this state. Today, I'm currently the only Black man. And I understand firsthand that in 2 decades, there hasn't been anyone there to speak to how these issues impact someone who grew up in Ferguson and know firsthand what it's like to be targeted by police as someone who was a college student just home for Christmas break and handcuffed because we were clearly driving while Black. Those are conversations that we need to have. We need to understand that Black lives matter, but it's also not mutually exclusive to the fact that we need to have the police officers in our community. And that's what we're focused on. So maintaining the narrative, not making it a us versus them circumstance, understanding that one cop doesn't mean all cops are bad, but we do need to make sure that they don't exist in our police departments and that they are doing their job, and that is to protect and serve the public. So that's what you can do to help. Sorry to make that long-winded, but this is a very important issue. And if we get off base and we make it a us versus them situation, not only would that derail what we're trying to do in terms of making this law in Missouri, but it also would take the focus off the fact that folks have lost their lives, and they lost their lives for what I would consider senseless reasons. And to think that a beautiful person like Breonna Taylor or teenagers like Mike Brown should be in college right now. They should be at work. They should be contributing to our society, but no, they're dead. And the folks that were involved in those situations in whatever fashion are walking the street today. And there's no accountability put in place to ensure that these things in Missouri are beyond. And I'm trying to prevent that from happening.
Thank you, Senator. So our time is up, but I don't want to be abrupt about it. So I want to offer our panelists, if there's something you want to say in 30 seconds to summarize or to just sort of, yes, yeah. Nicole. Or Chief.
She muted, so I'm gonna talk real quick while she
okay. Please do.
But one of the things that I just want to throw out there and encourage anybody, if there's still some questions out there or things that people wanted to get from me, please feel free to contact me here at the police department, email me, and ask me your questions, and I'll try to get those answers for you as soon as I can. So if it's something that we didn't get to, like I said, let's not stop the conversation here. Please feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you. In fact, we're going to try to save our chat as long as we don't make a mistake. We'll save our chat with the questions in it so we could look how to go forth from there. Okay, thank you. And Ms. Barton.
One last thing, somebody asked what they could do to get involved is please join our boards and our commissions and the MPSC. It would be great to have some additional members on our training plan committee, someone that offers additional skill sets than the members that we already have, that's helping me and Assistant Chief Nicolle work on our training plan. It would be great to have some other members on some of our other committees. We also have an at-large member opening on the Civilian Review Board. So if you want to apply, you live in Ferguson, put in your applications. And lastly, I wanted to piggyback off of what Senator Williams said. We're working, I'm a member of the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, and recently, like as of last Friday, I've been elected as a member of the board of directors for the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Thanks. And I just wanted to say that we're working on committees on our national board, and one of those is developing a national database. So when officers are terminated or they resign because of misconduct issues, their name would go in this database so that we can track that. So not only just our department, as Chief Armstrong said, we have a very stringent process of hiring and background check of our officers, because we're not going to take on the liability of hiring someone who has a tarnished record or has an misconduct on their previous employer. So we are looking closely at doing that on a national level, because these are things that we need to be interconnected with. So not just that you can leave from Jennings and go to St. Louis County, or you can leave. We want to know if you leave from Iowa and you want to come to Missouri. We want to be able to put that name in and see that name. We're working on some national legislation too for police reform efforts. So thank you for all the work that you're doing in that area too, Senator Williams, for our state as well. We're looking forward to working together as a national and state levels on all of the police reform efforts that we're working on.
Thank you. And yes, Carlton. Oh, you need to be unmuted. Lindsay, can we unmute?
There we go. Thank you so much for having me. I just wanted to say a few words, and also wanted to say, once again, I want to say thank you to Mayor Jones to have her on this call as well, and Senator Williams, also Police Chief Armstrong and Nicole Barton. Thank you very much for having me to speak with y'all. I do want to say that when we're talking about what is it that community members can do, so I'm currently living in Chicago. Just want to let you all know that. I have been working with the community engagement team here in Chicago and their consent decree. And when I was at Legal Defense Fund, I worked on the Baltimore consent decree as well as the Ferguson consent decree. So all those consent decrees that Chief Armstrong mentioned earlier, I've worked on one of them or all of them to some extent. Something I've learned from my experience from working on consent decrees around the country is that consent decrees are wonderful to get local and state policing reform efforts up and going. In other words, for instance, you have community members helping you establish policy and reviewing policy, and also making modifications to policy on like use of force, all the such, right? Mental crisis intervention. That's wonderful that you're doing that while a consent decree is in place, but the consent decree is not going to be in place forever. You know that. What is it you can do to make sure that your efforts now can be long-term solutions to a long-term problem? In other words, when we're talking about hiring and retention of law enforcement, how can community members be involved in establishing criteria for what law enforcement in their community should be? Should they have a college degree with at least a bachelor's in liberal arts, or only a high school diploma? Those are the kind of conversations community members should always, no matter what, be involved in. When we're talking about trainings, especially around civilian police contacts like use of force, stops, searches, all the such, those kind of trainings that law enforcement receive, rank and file and supervisors, community members should be involved in participating in those trainings, scenario-based role playing, and not only have them in the training, but also have them partnering with the lieutenant on conducting the training for the rank and file officers. In addition to the discipline, which I believe you already have, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, so you already have civilians involved in the disciplinary process, but these other processes that are very important for police-civilian interactions within a police department, I just believe that the consent decrees helped you to kind of hone in on that and establish those mechanisms. But the question for you to ask as a community is, what's going to happen once the consent decree is done? And now here we are on our own. Are we still going to implement these measures our way? In other words, are we going to own this as Ferguson and do it our way? And what is that going to look like? What I am proposing to you is do what other communities like Chicago and others are looking at doing, getting those community members more involved in those different mechanisms where the police-civilian encounters happen the most. So the trainings, the hiring and retention, the policy modification and development, and the discipline. All of those need to have community members involved in those mechanisms. And that means for the decision-making as well, not only to say, hey, I'm here, check the box, a community member is here. No, they have to substantively be involved. And so I just wanted to put out there, a lot of groups are doing that now because of the George Floyd incident and other things that have happened, like the Breonna Taylor case. How can we empower community members by getting them more involved? So I'm just saying the consent decree is giving you a way to do that because you have those mechanisms detailed, so you're already implementing them. It's just a matter of how can we make it long-term so it can survive beyond the consent decree, and then it can fully be owned by the Ferguson community. And I believe once you do that, you're going to become the model for those other jurisdictions in St. Louis County and in St. Louis City to show, hey, listen, we're doing it without the consent decree. So why can't you do it? So I just want to put that out there, and I hope I get to work with you through the CAT approach. Thank you very much.
Love to see that happen. And our president of Proud, you have any last words?
Sure do. First is, especially as we talked earlier, if you had problems getting to chat, we wish to continue this discussion in a future courageous conversation. If you have questions that are better for the police chief, for the senator, or someone else to respond to, contact them directly. But if you have a question that you would like to have in a future courageous conversation, you could email them to proud.ferguson@gmail.com. It's on the flyers that we sent and everything else. So, but we will be happy to compile them and use them as the basis for how we set up the next courageous conversation. With that also, I would really just extend my great gratitude to all of our, to everyone who came, and then in particular to our presenters. I thought this was extremely informative, extremely helpful, and sets, especially with this last comment, really sets us up for where do we look for the next steps as we move forward, fulfilling the consent decree and going on. So thank you very much. I also thank you to Senator for, I thought you were saying that you did not have your birthday party tonight, so I hope we did not take you from important family events. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you again on our next courageous conversation. Let's encourage everyone now. We have a few more minutes. Grab something to eat before the presidential debates start. And we hope everybody votes on November 3rd. Yeah, so just, does Senator have any final comments, or are we okay?
We're okay.
Please. Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye.